Welcome to Listen, Learn, and Love, hosted by Richard Osler. One of the purposes of this podcast, as my listeners know, is to follow the counsel of President M. Russell Ballard, who teaches Mormon leaders, along with rank and file, need to listen to and understand what LGBTQ members are feeling and experiencing. We must do better than we have in the past until all feel they have a spiritual home, a place to worship and serve the Lord. On today's show is Ben Schilaty. Welcome, Ben.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Ben is an active and committed member of the church. Ben grew up in Everett, Washington, served a mission to Chihuahua, Mexico, and came out as gay to close friends while at BYU at age 23. Ben currently serves as a temple worker in the Provo Temple and is currently in a Master's of Social Work program at BYU and also teaches Spanish at BYU. Ben has a PhD in Second Language Acquisition and Teaching and a Master's in Spanish Linguistics. Ben is age 34, and I tease Ben that I'm going to call him Dr. Schilaty during this podcast, but I'm not. I'm just going to call him Ben.
I put in a lot of work for that title, so.
We should. Ben, to our listeners, is one of the finest men I know. I've heard him speak several times, and I've seen the way he lifts, supports, and helps others. Ben is a gift to the church, to our society, and to the LGBT community that he's a part of. Ben was also part of the team that put together the first ever campus-wide LGBTQ event at BYU, where current BYU LGBTQ students shared their journey. On today's podcast, we'll hear more about that. But Ben, let's start just with your journey. Tell us where you grew up and then kind of walk us through when you became aware of your orientation.
Okay. So I grew up in Everett, Washington, just north of Seattle, and I had a pretty normal growing up in the church. I always loved the church. I was active and happy, and my parents were both converts and very committed, and so when they joined the church, they bought a house 4 blocks from the church because they meant it.
Wow.
And that's where I grew up, not far from the church. And back then, our church building is one of the oldest in the area. And so they wanted to live close, and that's what they decided to do. Yeah.
And what were you into in high school and junior high? What were some of your interests back in those days in Everett?
So I come from a very sporty family. My oldest brother was the captain of the basketball team. They got 5th in state that year. My other brother was really good at basketball. My sister was really into volleyball and softball, and both my parents played sports. And my grandpa had the record for the 100-meter dash or 100-yard dash at Western Washington University for more than 50 years.
Wow.
So I come from a very sporty family. So I tried out some sports and hated them all. And my junior year, I ended up doing some plays and really enjoyed that.
Do you remember the names of the plays?
Shoot, what were they?
I'm asking you hard questions, Ben.
I was in a play called Rumors, which was like a whodunit. And I was in a musical called How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying.
Wow.
And I was not one of the leads because I'm not a singer. Yeah.
And were you in Everett your whole growing up?
Yes.
Through high school?
My parents have lived in the same house since before I was born.
And how many siblings do you have, Ben?
I'm the youngest of 4. I'm the baby. Yeah.
And then as you're growing up in junior high and high school, when did you become aware of your orientation?
Yeah, so I first realized I was attracted to other boys when I was in 6th grade. I have no recollection of it in middle school or in elementary school before then. It wasn't until I hit puberty that I started realizing it. And it was distressing to me at the time, but not terribly distressing. And sometimes because my name is Ben, I would get teased and called Ben Gay. And so I really did not want people to think I was gay because I was worried that I might be. But it wasn't such a big problem because I knew that it was a phase. I would go on a mission and that would cure it. So looking forward, I didn't really see it as much of a problem. So it wasn't tough for me when I was a teenager.
Did people give you that nickname thinking you were gay, or was it just kind of what people do at that age is just tease people?
They were just being regular teenagers and teasing. So no, I don't think it was because anyone thought I was gay.
And did anybody think you were gay in junior high or high school? I mean, some people, people pick up and wonder a little bit, and some people don't. Any thoughts on that for you?
Yeah, so I ran in a lot of Mormon circles, even though I'm from Western Washington. And so when you're Mormon, you just don't assume people are gay. And so I very rarely got that. But there was this woman, or one of my fellow students in high school, and I remember she was telling me once that she thought I was gay, and I said, "No, there is no way. I am not gay." And I was really defensive about it. And she said, "Well, you might not be gay now, but you will be in the future."
Wow.
So I think she could kind of I mean, I was like, I didn't like sports. I liked plays, and I don't have a lot of gay stereotypes, but I do have enough that some people guessed.
Mm-hmm. How do you feel about those gay stereotypes? Just talk about that, because the longer I'm an ally, the more those stereotypes kind of have largely melted away. I think there's some, but a lot of those have kind of mellowed away as I've just met so many LGBTQ people.
Yeah, some of them are real. Like, I love musicals, but I'm terrible at dressing. So I don't know. So the stereotypes don't really matter to me, and I just try and be who I am, and I like what I like, and I'm not going to be apologetic about that now.
I like that.
Yeah.
And I think we'd all know that there are people that love musicals that aren't gay.
Right.
And people that love...
They're called women. No, just kidding.
And so I think one of the things I'm learning is the stereotypes. There may be some narrative but it's not sort of like a simple, formula to just to understand people's orientation, that people are very different, and everybody, just like you said, life journey is unique and individual to them. Mm-hmm. In some of the people I talk to, it's really hard on them emotionally in the junior high and high school years as they're coming to aware of their orientation. And some people are emotionally kind of able to navigate those roads, even though they're not talking to anybody about their orientation.
Right. Tell
our listeners how that worked for you, Ben.
Honestly, it's been a while since I was in middle school and high school, but I really don't remember it being much of a problem. Mm-hmm. I don't feel like I have many scars from back then, because it wasn't a problem. It was gonna go away. Mm-hmm. And so since it was a phase, I don't think it really affected me emotionally till after my mission.
Mm-hmm. And did you talk to anybody about your orientation before your mission or on your mission?
No, not even a little. Mm-mm.
Tell us about your mission. Tell us about opening your mission call and going to Mexico. And did you know anything about Mexico?
Yeah, so I had never left the country before, and I really, really wanted to learn Spanish. I really wanted to go.
Why? Did you take Spanish in high school or anything?
I just thought it was cool. I did take Spanish in high school, and I was really bad at it, which is, I remember coming back from mission and going and visiting my Spanish teacher and being excited that I could talk to her in Spanish, and my Spanish was better than hers. And it was, anyway, but I just thought Spanish was so cool, and I thought it would be such a beneficial language to know. So I really wanted to go to Mexico on my mission. So when I got called to Mexico, I was thrilled.
And geographically, where was Chihuahua, if I'm saying it right, in Mexico?
Yeah, Chihuahua's it's right on the border. So it's just below El Paso, Texas.
Okay.
So I spent half my mission in Ciudad Juarez, which is right on the border with El Paso.
That's a dangerous place, from what I know.
Yeah,
Was it dangerous when you were there?
I mean, it's a border town, so it's always dangerous. But it got a lot dangerous after I left, a lot more dangerous. Mm-hmm. But the first time the gospel was preached in Spanish was in my mission. And so missionaries have been in Juarez for more than 100 years. Mm-hmm. And so they're treated pretty well. Mm-hmm. Like I was never robbed or harassed, except by drunk people. But people were really good to us.
Uh-huh. And did you go to the Provo MTC? This is all probably Provo MTC to learn Spanish and then going there.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Some of the people I talk with are kind of making deals with God to have their orientation change. Pray away the gay, or I've talked to a couple men that, have sort of said, I'll go on a mission, but I need to leave my mission with my orientation not LGBTQ. Any of that going on with you during this time?
So during my mission, no. So I didn't feel like I had to make a deal with God. I just thought that's how it worked. Mm-hmm. So I didn't say, hey, if I go on a mission, God, will you cure me? Mm-hmm. I just thought that's what would naturally happen. And I didn't serve.
So you did have this feeling that I'd serve and I'd kind of end my mission and get on with my life, enter a heterosexual marriage, and this phase, to use your word earlier, would kind of end.
Yeah, exactly. I really thought I'd get married within a year, 2 years of getting home.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so you're at peace when did that sort of narrative potentially change? During your mission, as you realize your orientation is not changing, or later?
No, it didn't. I didn't realize that it hadn't changed until I got home. On my mission, since I wasn't trying to date or be like my orientation wasn't a problem on my mission at all. And I didn't really have problems liking my companions. It wasn't an issue on my mission. So it wasn't until I got home and I thought, now is the time that I need to get married and find someone, that I realized I am still attracted to men. So that's when things got tough. And that's when I started to make the deals with God, when I started to pray to not be gay and to fast to not be gay and to try and be so righteous that God would fix me. So I went to the temple every week.
You're living in Provo. You're a BYU undergraduate student.
Yeah.
You're going to the temple each week.
And I just tried so hard to not be gay. And I thought if I could just be righteous enough, then God would fix me. And not only that, but I believed that I needed to put my money where my mouth was, and that if I wanted to have a family, if I went and did, that God would prepare the way. So I went on a lot of dates the first few years I was home from my mission. I've said this before, but I've been on 27 blind dates.
Wow.
And I think I've been out with 100 different women.
Wow.
And that I've spent thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours dating. I tried really, really hard to get married when I was at BYU the first time.
Wow. And talk us through, I assume this is kind of a gradual process to realize this dating thing, and it sounds like you put an incredible amount of effort in it, is not leading me into, I'm not falling in love with any of these women to the point where I feel like I can marry them.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. And at first, it wasn't terribly distressing, because I know it takes a while to find someone that you like. So the first year I went on a lot of dates and I didn't find someone to date. And then that next year, my second year home for my mission, I went on a bunch of dates with this girl that I really liked. She was really cool and we got along really well. And I told her that I wanted to date her, and she said, "You know, Ben, we've been going on a lot of dates and I don't really feel any romantic spark between us. I just feel like we're really good friends." And she was right. That's exactly how it was.
Did you ever come out to any of the women you were dating that you were gay?
So after I came out to when I was 23, after that,
yeah.
I always told the women that I was dating. So I have had 2 girlfriends since I came out, and they both knew beforehand, before we started dating.
Yeah, and I'd love to get into that a little bit more. How were you doing emotionally during this time as you're starting to see your return missionary friends find their way into marriages, and you're doing everything you can dating, sort of fasting and praying and going to the temple, and it's kind of back on you to sort of be more righteous, to fix yourself, so to speak, and it's not happening. How are you doing emotionally, Ben?
Yeah, so at first, it wasn't too bad. The first year or so, it wasn't that bad. Then after a year, when I still hadn't had a girlfriend, then I started to really worry, like maybe this isn't going away. And I started to get really depressed. And I'm an outgoing, gregarious person, and I started to withdraw from my friendships, and I started spending a lot more time alone, which is really unlike me. And so I got really depressed. And I remember one day I went to the movies with a few friends, and I was just feeling terrible, just absolutely terrible. And one of my friends could tell what was going on, and she asked me if I was okay, and I said, "I'm doing all right." And she said, "What's going on? You just haven't seemed like yourself." And I said, "No, I'm fine." And in my head, I thought, if you had any idea what was going on, you would hate me. You
would hate me?
Yeah.
Wow. Why did you think she'd hate you?
Because I thought that gay people were gross and wicked, and I thought everyone else did too. And I thought that if they knew this awful secret about me, that they would reject me. Yeah.
Thanks for being so open, Ben, just how you felt during this time. I think it helps our listeners to know how you're feeling in this really difficult time, so we can do a better job of helping. I'm just touched by your honesty and the difficult spot you're in, all alone, walking this road with nobody understanding.
Yeah, it was hard. It was really hard.
Talk about shame and the shame that some gay people feel with their orientation.
Yeah.
Explain that to our listeners.
It's been interesting as I've grown up and matured more, because I really wanted to get married. And as I've reflected back on my motivations, one of the main reasons I wanted to get married was because I didn't want people to know I was gay. And so I had a lot of internalized shame and homophobia because I was willing to marry a woman so that people wouldn't find this out about me. And so I dealt with a lot of shame. I just really didn't want people to know. And it's been amazing as I've been more open about my experiences, how much more I like myself and love myself.
Were you suicidal during the darkest time?
I have never been suicidal, no. But what I will say is while I have never been wanting to take my own life, there have been times that I wished I were dead. And I think this comes from a teaching I've sometimes heard that that same-sex attraction is just a trial or an affliction of this life, and that it won't exist in the next life. And I wanted to be straight so bad that I would rather be dead and straight than alive and gay. And so I remember thinking, like, if I get cancer, that'd be great. I could die a hero and I wouldn't have to suffer anymore. So I never was suicidal, but there were times that I thought I would be better off dead.
While you're talking about that, any advice to our listeners about not teaching that? And just explain more why that can be, just in your own life, why that can be the idea that you're made straight in the next life is sort of an out to this life, and why that can be dangerous to teach that.
Yeah, it's tough because I think for some people that teaching is really comforting, and it just wasn't for me. But I think it's hard to tell someone that death is the answer, to look forward to the next life. And I think what we can do better is teach people to live now within the unique circumstances that they have. Because life doesn't get good when we're dead. Life can be really beautiful and wonderful now. And I wish that we could do a better job of teaching, look at your unique circumstances and learn how to thrive within those circumstances.
I love that. Talk more about, you're getting into a dark place. People are starting to pick up on this. I love what you sort of said about if you only knew what was really going inside of my head. Talk about then the next stage of your life.
Yeah, so while this was all happening, one of my friends stopped by my apartment at BYU one day, and she announced to the whole apartment that one of her friends had just come out to her. And up to this point...
A guy friend or girlfriend?
It was a guy friend.
Okay.
And up to this point, it hadn't occurred to me that there was another gay student at BYU. I thought I was the only one.
Wow.
And it is amazing how many people thought that.
And what year is this?
This was 2007.
Okay, so less than 10 years ago-ish.
Yeah, just about 10 years ago. And even now, I've talked to people who thought that just months ago. They thought they were the only gay person at BYU, which is crazy that we all felt so isolated when there were so many of us going through the same thing. So I was really interested in what she had to say, but I didn't want to show interest because then she might guess that I was gay. And so as my roommates and I asked her some questions, she said that there were gay students at BYU who wrote anonymous blogs. And so as soon as she left, I went to my room and I typed gay BYU student blog into Google, and I found about a dozen blogs right away. They were all anonymous. And I would go through and read the first post and then read to the current post, and some of them had multiple years of history. And almost all of them started out with, I love the church, but I experienced same-sex attraction. I'm going to stay faithful. And then by the end, most of them had left the church. And I just started to worry that that was going to be my future, that was the end of my story.
Yeah, talk more about those blogs. Did it give you assurance of other men and women walking your road? But it sounds like it also was concerning as you thought, well, this isn't really the path I want to end up on. Yeah,
at first it was amazing to just know that I wasn't alone. And that was exactly what I needed. And then feeling like I had to make the same decisions they made me feel trapped. Mm-hmm. And I wish I could have had a broader range of experiences so that I could have seen that there are multiple paths and many choices that people make. Because I felt like I either had to leave the church or end up marrying a woman. And both of those paths just seemed too hard at the time.
And talk more about next chapters. So you're reading these blogs. I assume you can't contact these people. They're anonymous blogs.
You know, they put in a lot of info. They were anonymous, but I actually found a number of them on Facebook. Because if you put a little bit of information in, you're not too hard to find. That makes me sound creepy now. But I never met any of those people, ever.
Okay, so there's no way to sort of have an internal support group at BYU if people are walking the same road.
Right.
Even though you're reading their blogs. Mm-hmm. And then talk more about just the future, the next chapters.
Yeah, so as I was reading these blogs, I remember one night just letting my mind finally kind of wander down the two paths my life could take. Like, what would my life look like if I left the church, and what would it look like if I stayed in the church? And I remember kneeling down in my room and telling Heavenly Father that if He needed me to be alone for the next 60 years, I was willing to sacrifice that for Him. And so I decided to stay. And I remember getting up and not feeling any better. And I opened up my scriptures and I randomly opened up to Alma 40, and it says that time is measured only to man. And I had just said in my prayer that I was willing to be alone for 60 years. And I thought, well, in the eternities, this isn't that long.
Wow.
And so I really thought that I was going to be lonely and sad for the rest of my life. And over the next couple of weeks, I just realized that I couldn't do it alone anymore, and I had to tell someone. And so there was this phrase that I got from one of the blogs that is not to say that you're gay, but that you, for as long as you can remember, you've been more attracted to men than women. And so one day my friend Mitch, who was my best friend from high school, called me, and he invited me to go on a walk, which is something we had never done before. And I turned to my roommate Craig, who was my best friend at the time. I said, Craig, do you want to go on a walk with me and Mitch? And he didn't even really know Mitch. And he said, I would be happy to. And we had never gone on a walk before either. So I was on a walk with my two best friends on an August night in Kiwanis Park in East Provo. And I just knew I had to tell them. And I started getting so nervous. I was physically ill. I thought I was going to vomit. But as I looked at what had brought me to this quiet place with two people I trusted, it felt like God had orchestrated the situation. So I asked them if we could sit down, and we sat down on the grass, and I said this phrase that for as long as I can remember, I've been more attracted to men than women. And I remember looking down at the grass because I couldn't look them in the eye. And they both responded with love and concern, and they responded the best way they possibly could have. And I remember turning to Craig and saying that I understood if he didn't want to be my roommate anymore. And Craig said, why wouldn't I want to be your roommate? You're the same person you've always been. And for me, that was when my heart started to heal, knowing that my friends weren't going to reject me, that they would be there for me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just touched by that story. I've heard that story a couple times, and it brings tears to my eyes every time you say it, Ben, because some of the people I talk to sort of come out to women or their mother, and those are wonderful ways to come out. But here you've come out to men, a guy you're rooming with, and I love the question. I don't know if you had prepared yourself to ask that question, or if it just came that if you don't want to be my friend or my roommate anymore, I understand.
Yeah, that had been a fear I'd been holding for a long time, because we'd been living together for a couple of months, and we had just signed a contract for the next year. And I remember signing that contract thinking he should know before I signed this contract, but I did it anyway. I remember feeling like a terrible person for not disclosing that before we did that. So I'd had that fear for a while.
Talk more about how that was the beginning of healing for you and the beginning of a door opening that had never been opened before.
Yeah, so
because some people say, why come out, or why are you sharing this, or why can't we just keep all this private? And I think more people understanding why people need to come out, but help our listeners understand that. Yeah,
so reflecting on it now as a much older person, I really hated myself for being gay. Like, I really hated that part of me. And I thought that obviously anyone else would hate it too. And once I saw that people weren't going to hate me because I was attracted to men, that gave me the permission to not hate myself too.
And I think some people, when they assume someone's coming out, it's part of embracing, going into the same-sex relationship standpoint. They sort of connect those two. Help us understand why those don't need to be connected.
Yeah, we shouldn't assume that someone is going to make a certain life choice because of their orientation or because they're sharing their orientation. That's just silly. But the first few dozen times I came out, it was like, and I wouldn't have said I was gay then. I would say I was experiencing same-sex attraction, or I said this phrase that I've been, for as long as I can remember, I've been more attracted to men than women. So I would say that, and then I'd say, and then I would basically bear my testimony and tell them how much I love the gospel and want to stay. And so it's kind of like you come out and then you take a step back and then end up talking about your commitment, and I felt like I needed to do that because I didn't want anyone to have those fears. And it's too bad that had to be the response, but it ended up leading to some really beautiful conversations where I was able to share my faith with people and affirm that.
Talk about your relationship with these two original men you came out with. How has that relationship been over the first year of you coming out, and it's been 10 years, I guess.
Yeah.
Not quite doing the math right, but it's been a while.
Yeah, it's great. Both Craig and Mitch live in other states. Mitch lives in my hometown, and every time I go home, I hang out with him and his wife every single time. And we still talk on the phone regularly, even when I'm here in Utah. And Craig, we haven't lived in the same state for many years, but we still talk on the phone regularly, and whenever we are in the same place, we hang out. So I still consider them both to be two of my closest friends.
I have never had anybody actually come out to me first, Ben. I've never had that honor. Let's tell our listeners what, if they happen to be someone that someone comes out to for the first time, what advice would you give to our listeners if they're privileged enough to be in that situation?
The best thing you can do is you can listen and you can love and make them feel welcome. And I realize I'm quoting the tagline of your podcast. I didn't even mean to do that. But
We stole it from you, Ben.
But people need to be listened to. And I had so many things I was holding in that as soon as I could talk about it, that's all I wanted to talk about for a while. And so if someone comes out to you, I would validate their feelings. I would say, I believe you. How has that been for you? Then let them tell some of their experiences. And then a week later, I would bring it up again because there's probably more they want to say. And then a month later, I would bring it up again. And you can say, thank you so much for trusting me with this information. What else do you want to say about it? And then just let them bring it up again, because so many people they just have all these things they want to share and explore. And now they can, they want to. But sometimes we have to give them the opportunity to do that. So that's what I would say. Can I just share one more story?
Good.
So about 5 years ago, I came out to 100 people in a year. And one of the people I came out to was Craig's aunt and uncle and his cousins. Because when Craig and I lived together, they started inviting us over for Sunday dinner. And then when Craig moved away, they kept inviting me.
Cool.
And then when I would come and visit Utah, I would always stay at their house. And so they have become my family. And they live in suburban Orem, and they're a conservative family. So I did not know how they were going to respond. So I had written this essay about coming out to Craig and Mitch in Kiwanis Park. And so I sent them that essay with a personalized letter, and I mailed it to them. And I had no idea how they were going to respond.
That takes guts.
And thank you. And Cindy, Craig's aunt, wrote me back, and it was just a nice little note. It wasn't a letter, just a note. And she thanked me for sharing my story. And she said, "This changes nothing. We still claim you as one of our own." And I think that's what people need to know when they come out, that nothing is different, and that we are still claimed by them.
One of the things that's interesting as you're talking about coming out is the need to, and more dots are connecting in my mind. You're 23 years old. You've been, I can't do the math on that, but 13 years-ish, 10 years closeted knowing your orientation.
Yeah.
And these don't seem like one-time conversations. It seems like if I'm being helpful listening to someone who's coming out, these are multiple conversations if I'm going to do a good job.
Exactly.
Yeah, over an extended period of time. It's not just sort of like checking a box and now, but you need to keep talking about it if I'm going to really be helpful to someone that's coming out and walking with them. Yeah,
and even now, 11 years after first coming out, my experiences are so different now than they were back then. And so, I still need to talk about it. And I mean, not because I'm struggling, but it's part of my life. But I have very different things to say now than I did back then. Back then I needed support and love. And right now that's not as much what I need because I've got that.
Mm-hmm. So how did your family handle you coming out as gay?
So I came out to my parents that Thanksgiving when I went home to visit.
Face to face. Then
face
you
to
waited
face.
on to his face to face.
And I knew I was going to do it over Thanksgiving. And
so then do you do it at the beginning of the holiday, Ben? Or as you're leaving the house?
That was the concern. So I was planning on doing it towards the end. But the first few dozen times I came out, I got so nervous I thought I was going to vomit. And so my whole first day home, it just wrecked the whole day because I was so worried about it. I thought, well, if I don't just tell them, then I'm going to wreck this whole trip. So I think it was my first or second night home, the first full day I was home, and I was in the living room. I just called my parents into the living room because I wanted to tell them something. And they sat down. I said my phrase for as long as I can remember. I've been more attracted to men than women. And my mom she cried, told me she loved me. Not cried because she was sad, but just cried because she's a mom. Mm-hmm. And she asked me if I thought it was a phase, and I said I hope so. And she just told me how much she loved me and how courageous I was. And then my dad said, "Well, you're probably better off being single because being married is hard." And typical dad response, things could be worse. And for about the next 6 years, we didn't talk about it a ton. And they were really kind. They brought it up. My dad would say, "How's that whole same-sex attraction thing going?" And I would say, "Great." And my mom would say, "We love you." And that was about it. But then
And did they kind of meet your needs during that time? It sounds like, sounds like your friends that were immediate circle were kind of meeting your day-to-day communication needs, and your parents were obviously involved in your life, but maybe not fulfilling that need to talk about on a regular basis.
Right. And I don't know why. I just didn't want to talk to my parents about it.
That's okay.
I just didn't really want to. And I actually remember when I first came out to them, I purposely went into my room after and called a friend that I could talk to for a long time. So if they came in, they couldn't talk to me. Like, I didn't want to talk about it.
Any thoughts why it's just was harder in your personal situation to kind of keep the conversation going with your parents versus your friends?
Yeah, I think at the time
it sounds like you're saying your parents did a great job.
Yeah, they were great. It wasn't anything they did wrong. It was just, at that point, we just didn't have that relationship where I talked to them about my emotions very much. And so that just wasn't our relationship back then. But that has since changed. And I remember this was about 5 years ago. I was home visiting them, and I was having a really tough time, and I wasn't sure if the church was the right place for me. And I remember expressing that to my mom, and she said, "Ben, we're not just on your side. We're with you 100%. And if you need to leave the church and marry a man, both you and he will always be part of our family." And what that did for me was it gave me the freedom to explore what I really wanted, because I had felt trapped by the church. I had felt like the church was trapping me. But then I was able to explore what I felt God wanted for me. And by honoring my agency, my mom gave me the freedom to make the choices I wanted to make. And now I'm still in the church. None of my choices have changed, but the paradigm with which I make those choices has changed. And that was a real gift from her.
I mean, that's just scripture, what you just said in the last 2 minutes. We could just end the podcast here and replay what you just said over and over again. That's really very thoughtful. But will you just say that whole thing again? That your parents, they sort of opened the door for what any road you wanted to walk, which is kind of a scary thing for parents if they're opening a door that potentially is outside the doctrine of our church. But for you, it was actually helpful on a number of levels to have them do that for you.
Yeah.
To just kind of walk through that again. That's really beautiful.
Well, I remember, this doesn't have to do with being gay, but when I was in high school, my brother was dating someone that my sister and I really didn't like. And for some reason, we thought they were going to come home engaged that night. And so my sister said to my dad, "What do we do if Jay comes home engaged?" And my dad said, "If they come home engaged," and he ended up marrying someone else. And my dad didn't like this woman either. And my dad said, if they come home engaged, we're going to cheer for them and we're going to be happy, because they're going to do what they want to do, whether we like it or not. But how we respond will dictate whether or not we're in their lives. And so I think that was something my parents knew, that if I was going to leave the church, I was going to do it whether or not they wanted me to. But they could choose if they were going to still be in my life based on how they responded.
Yeah, that's fascinating that they opened that door for you, that it was helpful then for you to have permission to do what you needed to do. And I think one of the things you said, it was about me and God at that point.
Yep.
Talk to LGBTQ people as they're making decisions about this principle of staying connected with God and even if the church becomes difficult for them potentially at times, and it sounds like at times that was a harder chapters of your life, just this idea of staying close to God and He'll guide you.
Yeah. So I have realized looking back that I let fear guide a lot of my decisions. I was afraid that people would learn I was gay. I was afraid of being alone forever. And I made a lot of decisions based on fear. And I see that happening with my younger gay friends as well. And so one piece of advice that I always give them is don't make decisions based on fear. Make decisions based on faith and hope. And because that's the way to live a joyful, thriving life. And so what I've had to learn to do is to try and ascertain God's will in my life and then to do that. And as I've done that, I've found a lot of joy. The other piece of advice I often give to my LGBTQ friends is I don't care what you do and I don't care what you believe, but they should be the same thing. And because when we live with integrity, when we live according to our beliefs, that's when we're really happy. And it's not my job to dictate someone's beliefs or their actions, but I really believe that people are happier when they're living according to their beliefs.
And give an example where someone would be not following that example.
So I have seen people who really believe in the church and really want to stay active and they want to follow that path. But then they get really lonely, and so they get on to Tinder or Grindr one night and then hook up with someone so that they won't feel lonely. And that rarely leads to connection like a deep connection. It just makes them feel more lonely in the end. And so if you want to stay, I say stay, and stay in the way that works for you. But I'm not saying that that's what anyone should do. But if that's what you want to do, and if that's what you believe you should do, then I think that there are ways to make that work.
Talk about loneliness, just how, if your own loneliness or loneliness that LGBTQ people feel, and there's a couple ways to kind of fill that hole of loneliness. One is the example you provided, but how have you been able to sort of manage the loneliness at times, and how have you been able to kind of fill that? I sort of believe that single people are wired for connection and wired for relationships, and they're not feel completely complete alone. And so there's sort of this natural yearning for companionship that's emotional, that's spiritual, that's physical.
Yeah. So I think loneliness is a pretty ubiquitous feeling among the human family. And I think that there are people who are married who are quite lonely. So I don't think it's something that just single people struggle with. But I do see it being an especially large problem in the gay Mormon world, because people feel like that loneliness is chronic, that it's not going to go away. The thing that has worked for me, I'll just tell 2 quick stories. So when I was teaching, I taught seminary when I was living in Tucson, when I was doing my PhD there. And one day,
early morning seminary?
No, it was release time. I taught for just a semester.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was a blast. I loved it. And I don't remember what the lesson was about, but I left feeling really crappy one day, and I had a long drive home. It was like a 40-minute drive home. And I just remember thinking, like, why can't I just have a family? And I just remember explaining to Heavenly Father, like in prayer as I was driving, like, why can't I just have a family? And the response I got, the feeling I got in response was, Ben, you already have a family. And I realized I have parents and siblings and nieces and nephews who really love me. And I had been not doing a great job of fostering those relationships. And so since that moment, I've done a lot better job of connecting with my own family. I call my siblings more. I call my parents more. And my sister and I have gone on a lot of trips together. And so just really building those relationships with the family that I do have. The other thing that really helped in Tucson was that was the first place I was fully and totally out with in all aspects of my life. And I made some really good friends there. And 2 of those people are Kevin and Allison, and they ended up marrying each other and middle naming their first son after me, which was very kind.
That's awesome.
But they are my family. Like, they're 100% my family. And I know that if I needed a place to live, I could live with them as long as I needed to. Like, I know, like, I'm as much their family as their real siblings. And so having people like that, friends who are family, has made all the difference for me. And the ward I was in Tucson, I was totally out there, and there was no way I was ever gonna sit alone on one of those pews on Sunday. People were gonna make sure I sat with them. And just feeling like there were people who were rallied around me to make sure I was part of their families really meant the world to me.
How do you come out to a ward? So this is a married ward or singles ward in Tucson?
Well, so I came out to 3 wards in Tucson. I came out to my elders quorum in a singles ward, and they were great. And then a few months after that, I turned 31, so I graduated without honors. And then I attended a Spanish branch for a few months. And I came out to them in a 5th Sunday lesson unexpectedly, and they were great.
Just randomly, right, during the lesson?
Yeah, well, what happened was, it was that lesson right after the gay marriage ruling, and so all the wards were supposed to have a lesson.
I was a singles ward bishop doing that lesson.
Yeah, so I went to that lesson. I almost went home. I didn't want to go. And I said, Heavenly Father, I'm not going to say anything unless you need me to. So in the middle of the lesson, we were talking about, the gays, quote unquote, as if they were some group that wasn't part of the church. And in the middle of the meeting, my hand unexpectedly went up, and I said, we're talking about people who experience same-sex attractions, that they're not part of us. But I want you to know that there are members of the church who experience same-sex attraction, who are gay and lesbian, who really want to stay. And I'm one of those people.
Wow.
And the branch president got up right then and gave me a hug and thanked me for sharing that. And these are, Hispanics who tend to be even more conservative. And they just loved me and embraced me, and it was beautiful. And then the tone of the meeting changed to how we can.
And were you speaking Spanish at the time?
This is all in Spanish, of course.
So you came out in Spanish.
Yeah, I've gotten to do that a few times.
You've come out in English and Spanish.
Yep. And then the whole tone of the meeting changed, and we started talking about how we can make our branch a place where everyone feels welcome, and it was beautiful. And then that branch got combined with another branch, so I just started attending a family ward, an English-speaking family ward. And I was called to be ward mission leader shortly after moving into the ward. And I met with the bishop when he called me to be ward mission leader, and we hadn't really talked before. And he told me that he knew about my situation and how much he respected me. Like, he didn't say gay or even same-sex attraction, just that he knew my situation. And I was giving a talk that day, and I said, I would like to come out of my talk. Would that be okay? And he said, I don't see why that would be a problem. So I was sitting on the stand, and almost no one knew me in the ward because I was brand new. And I stood up, and they all sustained me as ward mission leader. And then I walked up to the pulpit and told them all I was gay.
Wow.
And there was a receiving line after my talk. About a dozen people came up to thank me. And I wish I knew who those people were, but I didn't know who they were at the time, so I don't know who they were. And people just hugged me and thanked me for being so open and honest. And that's how it was the rest of the time I was in that ward. It was one of the best wards I've ever been in because I was finally me.
Talk about why you were a better ward mission leader because you were gay.
So there was a young man, he was about my age, he was in his early 30s, who started investigating the church. And he was, in another talk, I mentioned being gay. I didn't always mention it, but if it was relevant, I mentioned it. And he's more liberal, and he was, has no problem with LGBTQ people, and he knew that the church did have has a problem, quote unquote, and he didn't think people would be welcoming. And so before we had ever met, I think it was his first Sunday in church, I talk about being gay in my talk, and he told me later that was a turning point for him, because he was watching to see how people responded. And he said all he saw were smiles and happiness.
Wow.
As I talked about being gay. And he said that was one of the moments where he knew that he could fit in that church.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Any other stories of why being gay helped you be a better ward mission leader? Or did you also find ward people safe to talk to you about anything? Even though they were not LGBTQ, they just knew they could talk to you about stuff.
Yeah,
and you could handle stuff.
That's exactly what has happened. There's a line in the hymn, Lord, I Would Follow Thee, that says, in the quiet heart is hidden sorrow that the eye can't see. And when you are open with people, it's amazing how open they will be with you. I remember one Sunday, one of my friends pulled me aside and she said, can we talk after church? And I said, well, I don't really want to go to Sunday school. Why don't we just talk now? So we found an empty...
You rebel, Ben.
I know.
Turning you into the Sunday school president.
So we found an empty classroom, and she opened up and told me how she had been sexually assaulted.
Wow.
And she hadn't talked to anyone about it, and she knew that I would understand. And I remember just sitting with her as she cried and I cried, and just telling her that I would always be there for her and that she could talk about it whenever she wanted. And if she wanted to report that, I would report it with her. And so I think the way it helped me be a better ward mission leader is people could trust me with their stuff. And that was a real blessing. But honestly, sometimes with converts or people who were teaching, it was really awkward because I didn't know what to say, because I didn't want to say, hey, I'm gay, and then have them think that the church is a super liberal organization, because I didn't want to give them that false impression.
That's realistic.
But I also didn't want them to be really conservative and then be turned off to the gospel because I was gay. And so it was often hard to know how to come out to the people we worked with, but in the end they all knew, because yeah.
Going back to your mission, even though you're closeted, so to speak, do you think, my experience is that with talking with people that are gay, is their sexual orientation is more than their sexual orientation. It's all these Christ-like attributes that are kind of wrapped around it. Mm-hmm. Do you feel it helped you be a better missionary in Mexico because of your orientation? Or did you ever kind of connect any dots there? And maybe it happened more later.
Yeah, I haven't really connected those dots for my mission. I really don't think that my orientation was much a part of my life back. It was a part of my life, but it didn't really dictate who I was in a lot of ways. So I haven't really connected those dots. No.
Talk about when did you come out to a bishop? I don't know if you came out to a bishop or a stake president first or a priesthood leader, and talk about if we've got bishops or priesthood leaders, listening, talk about some good things that happened and maybe some things that were less helpful that happened.
So I've come out to probably 7 or 8 bishops now.
I wonder if that's a record.
My first bishop, I came out to him a few weeks before I came out to my parents. That was one of the reasons I had to come out to my parents, because now I think 4 people knew and my parents didn't know, and it felt weird to keep this from my parents. And so I felt like I needed to tell my bishop. And so I called the executive secretary and he said, well, do you need 15 minutes or 30 minutes? I said, well, I'll probably need 30. So when I came out to him, he was super nice. He said, I'm still learning. Are you keeping your covenants? And I said, yes. And so we talked for like 3 minutes and then we were done. And then we just kind of shot the breeze for 10 minutes, and then I left early. And so he didn't really have anything helpful to say. And a number of bishops have...
Was that a little just unsettling that you kind of maybe needed to go a little deeper like you did with other people, and he was able to go?
I don't know what I needed then, so I think it was fine. I think people not making a big deal of it was helpful at the time. Other times I come out to bishops, and one of my bishops said that he had a daughter who I thought he thought I would be really good with, so he set us up on a date, which I thought was...
So you came out gay, and he wanted to set you with his daughter.
Yeah, and then another bishop who said that there was a lesbian in the ward, and he thought, well, maybe you guys could make something work out because you both understand. And I said, I don't think that's a good idea. At least one person should be attracted to the other. And I found that as I've talked to other friends, that's very common for the bishop to recommend a woman for them to date, or even recommend a lesbian for them to date.
Why is recommending a woman not a good suggestion?
I think it can be for some people, but I think for most people it's not, because we've, like in my experience, I'd been down that road. Like I'd been dating like crazy for nearly 3 years when I came out to my bishop, and so for him to say, "Oh, you should just date a woman," that's nothing new than what I'd been doing, and it just led to feeling trapped, feeling like that was the only path that I could take. And I felt really trapped in that mindset that I had to marry a woman back then. So I think it can lead to feeling trapped. But for other people who want to be in mixed orientation marriages and who end up making that work, it's comforting to them. So I think it really depends on the person.
What's the best bishop experience you've ever had? So
my current bishop is an amazing person. He's a religion teacher at BYU. And I just moved to Provo from Arizona. And I had been told that I would not be well received if I was open about being gay.
Who told you that?
A number of people.
Wow.
Yeah. So I wasn't sure what I was going to do. But I'd been so open and out in Tucson, I just couldn't go back in the closet. And so in our first meeting, he asked me what I was studying, and I said social work. He said, well, why do you want to be a social worker? And I said, well, I want to work with LGBTQ Mormons and their families because I'm gay.
Wow.
And
You said gay. You didn't say SSA at this point? Or?
No, I stopped doing that years ago. And he was so kind. He asked some really good questions and told me how much he appreciated that I shared the information with him. And then he said this beautiful thing. He said, what do I need to know and understand so I can serve you better? And I can't imagine.
What do I need to know and understand so I can serve you better?
Yep, that's what he said.
That's kind of like scripture, Ben.
Mm-hmm. And then he really put his money where his mouth was. And he took me out to lunch a few weeks later. And he has really taken time to get to know me so that he does know how to serve me. And I have so appreciated that.
How is he best serving you?
I think he is not trying to change me. I think he trusts me to live the gospel and to serve the members of the ward. And so the way that he's serving me and the way that I need to be served is just letting me be me, and trusting me that I will make the right choices.
I love that.
Yeah.
I think that's so helpful for all of us as parents and priesthood leaders. That's pretty tender. At some point, and I think it was this ward, you were handed and you posted this on social media, and I loved it. Uh-huh. You had the new member form. I remember when I was the singles ward bishop, we had the new member form, and there were some open-ended questions in that new member form. Talk about one of those new member forms that you filled out.
Yeah, so it was the same ward, and so I was still worried about coming out. And so I was filling out this form. At the bottom, it said, is there anything else you want us to know? And I had just been to the Love Loud concert the night before, and it was such a beautiful spiritual experience. It was just beautiful. And Carolyn Pearson had given a brief talk there, and she wrote this poem for the event about a butterfly that couldn't go back into its chrysalis. And as I was filling out that form, I remembered what she said. And I thought, I can't go back into my chrysalis. I'm a butterfly. And so, and the question where it says, is there anything else we should know about you? I wrote, I'm gay.
Wow.
Yeah. And then I handed it to like the new member coordinator, whoever. But they didn't look at it.
Is this at the end of the third hour or the beginning?
This is the second hour.
Okay.
This is in the middle of Sunday school. Like they had a Sunday school for new members. And so they didn't look at it. And so they asked me what I'd been up to. And I said I'd been to Love Loud and one of them had been too, as he'd been as well. And so I came out to them too, and they were super cool. And I think that's probably what gave me courage to come out to my bishop an hour later.
So it was that same day, an hour later.
It was that same day. Yeah.
And how did your ward respond as you're out in this ward that people told you not to be out in?
Amazing. They've been amazing. So I'm in a mid-singles ward, and the mid-singles ward is a very Christian place because it's a lot of people whose lives haven't worked out the way they expected. And so there are people there who are coming back to church after being gone for a long time, and people who have been in jail or have had drug addictions or recently divorced. And I think people just love you for who you are there. So I couldn't have landed in a better place.
And what's your calling in your ward?
I'm the second counselor in the Elders Quorum presidency. Well, we have two Elders Quorum presidencies, and I'm in one of them. Yeah, and it's fun because the Elders Quorum president, he didn't go on a mission, and then the first counselor is a recent convert, and then I'm gay.
Wow.
So I think we have a nice, we're just not the typical ward. It's not people whose lives have always followed the mold, and I think that's beautiful.
Yeah, I love those kind of words. Talk about the temple and its role in your life as a gay man.
Yeah, so I'm a temple worker right now in the Provo Temple, and I really love it. I am busy with work and school, and I work there on Tuesdays. And almost every Tuesday, I think I don't have time to go. I shouldn't be doing this, and then I'll go and I'll come out just feeling like renewed and refreshed. And so the temple is really a place of strength for me. And there's a scriptural phrase that's repeated over and over again in the temple, and it's be fruitful, multiply, and replenish the earth. And I used to think that all those words meant to have children. And since I've heard that phrase so many times in the temple, I've started to really ponder what that means for me. And the commandment to replenish the earth has really struck me in the last few months. And I've come to learn I don't think replenish means to have children. And so I thought, well, how can I replenish the earth as a single person? I thought, well, I could plant a tree or recycle. And I thought, no, I think it's deeper than that. And the earth is for God's children. And I looked up synonyms of the word replenish, and one of them is refresh. And I thought, well, I'm going to replenish the earth by making sure that every person I interact with is refreshed and renewed. And so being in the temple has given me new insights and a new daily goal to make sure that everyone is replenished because they've interacted with me.
I love that. It's very, very thoughtful. Talk about, and very, very helpful to people that don't fit them, replenish and multiply the earth. There's a lot of people for a number of reasons in our faith that aren't in traditional families and able to have children. That's very thoughtful and very helpful. Was the temple helpful for you back even in your closeted days as a house of refuge or a house that just helped you, especially during the this phase where you're trying to kind of pray it away?
Yeah, so I went to the temple. I've gone to the temple every week when I live close to the temple. And then in Arizona, the temple was about 2 hours away, so I went once a month. So I've always been a regular temple attendee. And when you go that much, sometimes it's just boring. I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. But there have been, I've had some really transformative and transcending experiences in the house of the Lord. And so the temple for me, even the times when it's boring, I walk out with my shoulders squared, feeling like I have power to face the world. So it has really given me a lot of strength. One time when I was closeted, when I was in my depressed phase, I remember going to the Mount Timpanogos Temple by myself and standing in the celestial room and looking in one of the big mirrors and just feeling empty and looking empty and thinking, why do I feel so alone in the temple? This is the place I shouldn't feel alone. And I remember walking over to one of the prayer rolls and writing my own name down. That was the only time I've ever done that.
Wow, that's cool.
But yeah, so mostly the temple has been a really uplifting place, but sometimes it has reminded me of the emptiness I used to feel that I don't feel anymore.
Yeah, I like that. I think for some members of our church, sometimes the temple doesn't resonate as much, and I think we need to validate that. Sometimes it may not be the they may not have just the experiences. And so then if we feel that way, then we think the fault's all with us and there's something wrong. We might pull away and over self-analyze. But I think it's okay to validate that there may be times where the temple we go and we just don't feel as connected as others.
Yeah, right.
And just to kind of hang in there, like you said, a wonderful example. Mm-hmm. Talk about BYU, because we've had this big event at BYU. Why don't you walk our listeners through what happened at BYU if they weren't aware? And I realize this podcast may be released a few weeks after the event, even though as we're talking, it just happened a few days ago. And just the backstory of how this came to pass.
Yeah, so on Thursday, March 15th, BYU Student Life hosted an LGBTQ and SSA student forum. And the forum was a panel of 4 students, and I was one of them. And we purposely got a student to represent the L, the G, the B, and the T of the LGBT acronym, and I was the G. Uh-huh. And this event had been months in the making. A number of LGBTQ students got together with some administrators at BYU, and we planned the event together. And we weren't sure we were going to have approval for the event until a week before it happened when we got approval, and we had made posters and flyers. So we spent days going around putting those flyers up and inviting people, and Liza basically planned the event and took charge of it. And she got a whole team together of dozens of queer students who stood out in the cold, passing out flyers and inviting people. And they were really dedicated. It was amazing.
Talk about why there's a need for this kind of event at BYU. And some people would say, why we don't have an event for every group of people at BYU? Why is this important?
Well, we should have an event for every group.
Great answer, Ben.
People of color, divorced people. There are all kinds of people who feel like they don't fit in. This is just the community I feel connected to, so that's why I'm working for us so hard. But I'll just talk from my own experience. So last semester, I was out in all aspects of my life, but I was teaching just one Spanish class, and my students didn't know I was gay. And sometimes they would ask about my personal life, and I would kind of avoid the issue because I was afraid. Like, I didn't know if I could come out to them.
Now you're the teacher.
Yeah. And finally, towards the end of the semester, I did it. I came out to them, and they were all super kind.
How did you do that?
Well, I had just been to an LGBTQ conference, and I had to miss class for it. And so people said, well, why were you gone? I said, well, I was at this conference because I identify as gay. And they were all really kind. But then we didn't really talk about it because my sexuality isn't really the topic of Spanish class. So the next day, I just really felt like we needed to talk about it more, but I didn't feel like class was the right place. And I had recorded a Voices of Hope video that had just come out like a week or two before that. And so I told them all at the end of class, I said, I'm going to be sending you an email that isn't class related, and you don't have to read, but you'll be getting an email from me. And so in the email, I just kind of told a little bit of my story and why I wanted to tell them. And then I gave a link to the video. And over the next week, I only had 25 students. 11 of them wrote back saying how much they appreciated it and what it meant to them, and that they were so grateful I had shared my story. And so I was worried that I was going to get in trouble for doing it, but instead all I got was gratitude. And on the last day of class, I do kind of like a debrief of the semester where we talk about all the things we'd learned, and a number of students mentioned how meaningful that had been to them. So the reason I mentioned that story is I'm a teacher, and I wanted to have this conversation, but I was afraid to have it. And I know high-level administrators. I know people in the Spanish department really well, and I knew that even if I did get in trouble, I wasn't going to get fired. I have a lot of privilege in that regard, but I was still afraid. And imagine if you are a freshman who has no connections, who has nowhere to go, no administrator who will have your back. Imagine how hard it is for them. And so this is a conversation we need to be having on campus because people are dying on the inside and they are feeling lonely and isolated. And I felt so scared and alone at BYU for 2 years, and I don't want anyone to ever feel that way again. And so I'm going to use my voice so that the new kids who are at BYU never have to go through the pain that I went through. That's why we had that event.
Talk about the event. What was it like for you at BYU now, 10 years later, to be talking in an event like that.
Yeah. So,
and how was the attendance? And I think you did 2 events.
Yeah. So we did one in the morning and one in the evening, so that a lot of people would have time to come.
And this is on campus, an approved event.
Yep, on campus. Administrators were all the events. They were involved in the planning, so of course they were going to be there. We were in 2 large auditoriums for both events, and we had an overflow room both times. And both times the overflow filled up, and both rooms were standing room only. In the evening event, we had a second overflow room that also almost filled up.
Wow!
So there was a lot of interest. So the panelists, we took questions from the audience that were submitted through an app, and there were 2 moderators who were both BYU administrators who asked us the questions, and it was just a beautiful event. We were able to just be honest and share our stories. And then the thing that touched me so much that it made me cry was at the end of the first event, when the moderators said, "Please thank our panelists," they immediately gave us a standing ovation. And I never in a million years thought that I would be able to share my story openly at BYU and then be applauded for it. And then in the evening session, we didn't do this in the first one, but in the evening panel, Liza, who planned everything, as she was thanking everyone for coming, she said, "If you identify as LGBTQ or SSA and feel comfortable, we invite you to stand." And there were about 400 people in the room, I think a little more, and probably about a fifth of the room stood up.
Wow.
And then the room applauded for them.
Wow.
And to see straight students applaud my LGBTQ and SSA family was a moving moment, and something that I'm so grateful that I got to see.
Why do you think what you saw is consistent with the doctrine that Christ taught?
Because Christ spent his time with the marginalized. He spent his time with people who were the strangers. And if we can't learn to welcome the strangers among us, then we're not being Christian. And Sister Eubank gave a devotional at BYU a few months ago, where she talked about the strangers among us. And she asked these beautiful questions. She said, "Can you stitch a relationship as well as you can stitch a quilt? And who do you consider an enemy that you're going to make a brother?" And I just love that there are people who don't feel welcome at BYU because of their orientation or gender identity. And we can do a better job of making sure that they not only are welcome at BYU, but that they belong at BYU.
A couple thoughts come to my mind is what's happening at BYU is often a template for the rest of the church schools. Mm-hmm. I don't know how many church schools we have, but my hope is what happened at BYU is the beginning of events like this happening at BYU and all our church schools. I've had some interaction with BYU administrators since I've sort of been out as an LGBTQ ally, and they have been really, really good interactions. I maybe was a little surprised just with how loving and supportive and understanding are the wonderful BYU administrators that I've interacted with about this issue are. Talk any more about that and your feeling about BYU administrators and their sensitivity to this issue.
I know a number of high-level administrators, and they are my heroes. The amount of time, personal time, that they put in to listening to and understanding the LGBTQ and SSA students at BYU is remarkable. These are people with enormously important jobs who do not have a lot of extra time and who donate hours and hours of their time to help. And they are really open. They're open about their work. One administrator says that this is the most important part of her job.
Wow.
And she's got a lot to do, and this is what she feels is the most important. And we just had this really cute story. We had a meeting with the LGBTQ students who helped plan this event. We had a meeting at an administrator's house on a Sunday night, and he showed us a picture that his 6-year-old daughter had drawn and had a rainbow on it. And she said that she drew it because she knew Daddy's friends loved rainbows.
Wow.
And so not only are they doing this work, but they're talking to their families about it. And it's been amazing.
What's caused this with BYU administrators? And there may not be one answer. It may be different answers for every administrator, but clearly something's happened with thoughtful BYU administrators.
Yeah. What happened, and I will share this because Liz Darger shared this in an article she wrote in BYU Magazine. She's been part of the Common Ground initiative that the NCAA is hosting, where they bring together leaders from faith-based institutions and leaders from the LGBTQ community so they can find common ground and make sure that all universities and campuses are safe places for student athletes. And so she went to this conference and just had her heart opened and expanded. And she came back and said, there are a number of things we can do at BYU that are in keeping with the honor code and our doctrine that could make BYU a better place. And so she talked to some other administrators and they said, let's get this done. So I think it's a lot of people with really good hearts who just really, really care about the students and want them to make sure that they know they belong. So I think it's a lot of people with good hearts doing what they know is right.
I love that answer. And I remember volunteering at Circle, and several BYU administrators came one day, and they just wanted to have a conversation and understand. And I just think for our listeners, I think there's really thoughtful people in our church that are trying to do the right thing and recognizing that's part of our baptism covenants and part of Christ's example to do what has happened at BYU. And I love the way you point out this is within our doctrine. Mm-hmm. This is within the honor code. It's probably part of our baptism covenants.
Right.
And I think it's a wonderful new chapter that's opened up. Any more thoughts on that, Ben?
I wish that the students who are struggling at BYU right now, who are LGBTQ and SSA, knew how much the administration loved them. And I think if they could just see that better, that they would have more hope. Yeah. Talk
more to those students that might be listening.
Well,
that freshman, sophomore, closeted man or woman.
Yeah, well, I talk to them all the time.
I bet you do.
I would just want them to know that I love them, and that I'm not going to dictate what choices they make, that I honor their agency, and that whatever choices they do make, that I'm going to walk with them on their journey, and that my love for them is not conditioned on their choices, but that their worth was set when they were born, and that I honor that worth.
That's some more scripture for us. Their worth was set when they were born.
Yeah.
Talk about coming out. I meet with some people. I met with a really good man this week, college-age man who feels impressed that his path isn't to come out. Mm-hmm. Talk about honoring everybody's sort of decisions on coming out versus not coming out.
Yeah, I think you just said it. It's not my job to dictate what anyone should do. Coming out for me has been the right choice, and it has made me much more healthy and happy. And so I could just talk from my experience, but if someone decides that that's not the right thing for them, that's their choice. It's their life.
And why could it be okay for someone not to come out?
I think some people worry that it will become the focus of their life and it will become how they're seen. And there are so many things going on in my life and so many other parts of me. Like, I don't want being gay to be my thing. But at the same time, I feel like it's an important part of my ministry. So if someone doesn't want this to be what they're known for, that's their choice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Where this Kinsey scale we sometimes talk about, explain that to our listeners and where you are on that scale.
So the Kinsey scale was developed decades ago, and there are plenty of critiques about it. But basically, it's a scale from 1 to 6. And if you're a 1, you're completely attracted to the opposite sex. And if you're a 6, you're completely attracted to the same sex. And if you're a 3, you're equally attracted to both sexes. And so you can fall anywhere on the scale. You can be a 4 and be more attracted to the same sex, but still attracted to the opposite sex. I would say I'm a Kinsey 6.
It sounds like you're proud of that.
I wouldn't say I'm proud. I'm just glad that I can say it now. Yeah.
Talk about, I love some of our leaders of our church that talk about we're in a 3-act play. And as I teach the plan of salvation, as you did on the mission, in fact, I was on a call with a gay man in the UK talking about the plan of salvation and the pre-earth life, that he never sort of thought about what that meant for him as part of his orientation. But talk about, the pre-earth life and the post-earth life and how your orientation fits into all of that. Any impressions about that, that context of the complete plan of salvation and your orientation right now?
Yeah, I don't have loads of thoughts on what I was like in the pre-earth life. I kind of see us as like being children, and I don't know how much children have sexuality. I don't know. So I'm not really sure how that fits into the pre-earth life. But I believe that I was fully aware that I would be gay if I wasn't already, and that I was accepting of that.
So in the pre-earth life, you believe you were fully aware of the path that you were being born into.
Yes, I have no doubt of that. And as far as the next life,
that's really powerful. That's very consistent with what I've personally believe, is that most of the LGBTQ people I meet with and feel the same way, that this is part of their path. It's not some limitation of mortality or something that's randomly come. It's part of their perfect plan from Heavenly Father.
And you know, God really answers my prayers, like really, really well. I remember just a few months ago, I'd been working at the temple for a little while, and I didn't have a lot of close friends there, and I just really wanted to make some friends. So as I was driving to the temple, I said, Heavenly Father, I'd really just like to make a friend tonight. And then as I was changing in the locker room, the guy next to me said, well, you're Ben, right? And I said, yes. And he said, you want to come over for dinner sometime? And I was like, come on, Heavenly Father, you have to be a little more subtle than that. But Heavenly Father really answers my prayers in miraculous ways. And if he wanted me to be straight right now, I would be straight because I prayed for it so much. And so I 100% believe that I am the way God intends me to be right now. What my life will look like in the next life, I don't know. If you asked me 10 years ago, I would say there is no way I will be gay in the next life. It's an affliction of this life, and I'll be straight as soon as I'm dead. If you asked me 4 years ago when I was in love with my best friend and wanted to spend eternity with him, I would have said, nope, I'm gay forever. This is part of me. Now I allow ambiguity, and I just say that I don't know. And I think that we don't know a lot of the next life and what that will look like. But there are two scriptures that really help shape how I feel about this. And one is 1 Corinthians 2:9 that says, eye hath not seen, and ear hath not heard, neither hath entered into the heart of man the things which God hath prepared for them that love him. And the other one is D&C 58 verse 3 that says, ye cannot behold with your natural eyes for the present time the design of your God concerning those things which will come hereafter. And so I think that we can't see what the next life will be like. We can't even imagine. It hasn't even entered into our hearts yet what it'll be like. And so I won't claim to know what I'll be like in the next life. But what I do know is that I'll be the way I'm supposed to be.
That's beautiful. That's really beautiful. It's as fine an answer I've ever heard to that question. Thank you. Talk about your 33, if I've got it right, Ben.
34.
34.
Close. And
you're a healthy guy. You're going to live to be 85 or 90 or maybe 95. Talk about just your future in this earth life and what you think will be your path.
Yeah. So I've really learned that I need to live on daily bread, and that God won't give me tomorrow's manna today, but he will give it to me tomorrow. And so I just trust that as I walk along this path, I'll figure it out. And if you had told me 10 years ago what I would be doing now, I wouldn't have believed you. I would have thought that was crazy. And so 10 years from now, I mean, I can imagine what my life will be like, but who really knows? And so I don't really know what my life is going to look like. But the thing that makes the most sense to me is I imagine I will stay single. I imagine staying in the church, and I imagine having friends who feel like family, who make my life rich and wonderful. And I really hope I can continue working at BYU, and I hope I can make a career there.
I love that. I love that answer that seems manageable. I think it reminds me of when the first day of my mission, I could handle that first day of my mission, but that night, I think I added up how many more days I had, and I got really scared. And God just said, don't do that. You did today just fine. Just take tomorrow just fine. And somehow that really worked for me. And I sense that's what you're trying to do with the rest of your life. If you think about the totality of it, and how that's going to all work out, that sounds harder than just what your answer was. I'm just taking chunks of time at a time, and I can see. I like Elder Bednar's talk about fog. You can sometimes see the next 3 steps you need to take, and you take those in faith, and then fog kind of clears, and you know the next steps. And it sounds like that's really pragmatic, helpful advice, I would think, to everybody listening to this podcast about how to move forward.
And I think if we can really get bogged down looking too much into the future. And I mean, that doesn't mean we shouldn't plan or make goals and try and work towards the things we want to do. But in the end, none of us knows what's going to happen to us. None of us knows what our lives are going to look like. And so I think that's where faith comes in. And we just have faith that as we take the next steps, that God will lead us along and he'll lead us to a beautiful life.
You've mentioned this recently in the podcast, but how do you handle people that are gay that end up going into same-sex relationships and leaving the church? How do you sort of reconcile? What would you, I think you said earlier, you honor everybody's path. Mm-hmm. And while you maybe invite everybody to live the doctrine of the church we believe in, you're honoring their individual choices. How would you kind of explain that you're choosing your path, but you're supporting people on their individual paths? And is that somehow crossing a line in our doctrine to be that tolerant or that lenient or whatever words some might use to say, well, you're still being their friend?
Mm-hmm. So I think we have a worry in the church that we will condone sin. And I just don't worry about that. I'm not sure that worrying about condoning sin is in the scriptures, but what is in the scriptures is Jesus talking about, maybe I should look that up. Maybe there's something like that in the scriptures. But what is in the scriptures that I know for sure is Jesus taught that we can't try and take the mote out of someone's eye because we have a beam in our own eye. And what he meant was we shouldn't be focusing on other people's sins because we have our own sins. Who among us isn't a sinner? And so I don't feel like it is my right or my job or my duty to condemn anyone because they're making choices different than I am. And just because someone's in a same-sex relationship doesn't mean they aren't developing Christ-like attributes of humility and patience and charity, which are really going to transform them. And you can be in the church, sealed in the temple, and be an awful, terrible person. And so I think if there's someone who is striving to be their best self, I'm just grateful for them. And it's interesting that we like to point out some sins and not others. I've been pointing this out to people recently that the Book of Mormon warns against costly apparel many, many times, and how costly apparel leads to pride and the downfall of civilization. And so I jokingly say that if I'm not going to go to a wedding, it's not going to be because of the genders of the people getting married, but because of the cost of the wedding dress. But I'm just kidding. I don't really care. But I think that we really, we focus on other people's sins much too much. We just need to focus on our own sins.
Do you have friends that are in same-sex relationships?
Totally, yeah, and I love them. Mm-hmm.
And you have friends, obviously, that aren't.
Yeah, definitely.
And do you think that's consistent with what Christ taught or different than what Christ taught?
I think Christ taught everyone to come unto him. And I think that none of us does that perfectly. And I, if someone is going to do their best to come unto Christ, then I'm grateful for them.
I love that answer. I was reading just Friday during my temple shift in John, can't remember which, 14, and it, just love everyone came not only in one scripture, but then 3 verses later, the very same, and the older I get, the more I just realize that part of my desire to follow Christ is to love everybody. It just seems, I've always never really thought of love as a doctrine until the last 5 years, Ben, but then I've thought, well, that's just like a core doctrine of our church. It's not just an attribute or a nice thing to do. It's actually a doctrine or a commandment. Any thoughts on that?
Well, it's the 2 greatest commandments, love God and love your fellow man. Yeah. Love is the core of everything. It's why our Heavenly Father sent his Son, and it's why Jesus Christ was willing to do what he did for us. It's why our mothers are willing to be sick for 9 months so that we can even have a chance to be born. Love and charity is everything. And if we don't have charity, then what's the point of our life? Yeah, and it says in Moroni 7, in that beautiful last verse, that if we have developed the pure love of Christ, then when Christ appears, we'll be like him. And won't that be cool?
That's cool.
Christ will show up and be like, you're like me because you love like I do.
That's cool.
I hope I can be the kind of person that he would say that to.
Do you have any last thoughts you'd like to share with our listeners?
I just want to say there's a scripture in 2 Peter chapter 1, And in that chapter, he lists some Christ-like attributes. And he says that if all these things be in you and abound, ye shall neither be barren nor unfruitful in the knowledge of our Lord. And I love that. And then he goes on to say that he says, we have not followed cunningly devised fables when we made known unto you the coming of the majesty of our Lord Jesus Christ. It's something like that. I'm paraphrasing a little bit. And I have not been, he says, we are eyewitnesses of his majesty. That's what he says. And I have not been an eyewitness of the resurrection of Jesus Christ, but I have been an eyewitness of the atonement. And I used to think that the atonement would make me straight, but instead it healed my broken heart.
Wow.
And I've also been an eyewitness that our heavenly parents love their LGBTQ children. And I want everyone listening to know that our heavenly parents love us very much.
Thank you, Ben. On behalf of all of our listeners, thank you. I've been in tears about 4 times during this podcast. The spirit that's here, the spirit you bring, the things you're teaching. You have a unique life mission, Ben.
Thank you.
I would love to see your older selves where you are at 43 and 53, and this especially where our church has opened this door to hear LGBTQ stories, and I just think this is part of your life mission, and it's no coincidence you're at BYU right now. It's no coincidence that who you are and the ability to help our church and understand our LGBTQ brothers and sisters in your voice. So on behalf of all of our listeners and me personally, Ben, thank you for being you. You are awesome. And thanks for joining us, our listeners.